Hello, everybody. This is Slavi Younger Nightingale with Frasch. You have seen my mug many times before. As you guys know, here at Frasch, we like to mix it up. We do quite a few CEUs. We also do some product launches to introduce you to what we're doing. And we have started this new series where we talk to our favorite folks, folks that are the experts in their field. And who I have for you today is my absolute favorite. It's Alan Alfano. He's with a company called MAREK Brothers. You may have heard of them. They are a specialty drywall and acoustical installers. They are quite sizable. They've been around since 1938. They have 8 offices across 3 states, and they're definitely one of our go-tos. If you want an exceptional work and great people to work with. So thank you so much, Alan, for joining me for this conversation. We greatly appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Slavia. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to come on.
Yeah, for sure. So, as we were kind of prepping to what we want to do, and really what we kind of hear a lot about, if you ask people what they like to understand a little more, installation comes up constantly, right? And it's probably for obvious reasons. The way your final thing will look like doesn't just depend on the product you choose. It very much depends on the installation. Um, and we live in a real world, so the money part is a huge consideration, right? We all want champagne, right, on beer budget, or at least we want it to look like
Right.
champagne if we can. Yeah. So can you speak a little bit to few of this? Let's start maybe like with the fundamentals, like what to watch out for, what to do to maybe avoid um, where it can kind of get really expensive, or how to avoid some of the unexpected things where you see things going wrong in your line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to cost of installation, the ease of installation is paramount. So depending on how complex the system is and how easy it is to install, that directly affects the installation cost. So that's something to make sure that's considered, um, as well as, a construction budget can really get broken on an installation cost. When it comes to acoustics, a lot of times there's a goal set to achieve a certain level of acoustics. However, sometimes that reality is not necessarily seen until folks are in the office. So that is sometimes gets cut from the budget first.
Mm,
And that's a
yeah.
problem that can increase installation costs because what you have is now we're coming in, we're installing in an occupied space, which typically then we have to work after hours, which drives the installation cost because everything's at a premium time.
Hmm.
You're also having the challenge of working around furniture, whether that furniture can be moved or not, who's going to be moving that furniture. Also, there's some furniture that can't be moved, so there's some additional cost in the way of scaffolding. If we have to come in and bridge over a large conference room table on day two, that's something that needs to be considered and really paid more attention to during a construction process and project to get that stuff installed right away during the construction phase.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's really interesting because I have definitely seen it. It's one of those things that if it's sort of looked at as, oh, let's see how it is and we'll do it later. If we don't do a good job, right, the designers, architects, the installers, and the manufacturers to really explain that this piece is not nice to have, it's sort of a must have, because the space, sound, if you get that wrong, the space is not going to be usable, right? We've all experienced that. Yeah, you walk somewhere and you're like, oh, this is so gorgeous, and you walk in and you get bombarded by that. And the other thing is that doing it later is not apples to apples, right? We're now talking easily the installation could be 3 times the cost, right? So they might be able to do substantially less or actually very much overspend. But let's imagine the perfect scenario, right? Where when you're still no one has moved in and we're coming in. We kind of talked about, which I learned from you guys, is that one of the really obviously over-engineered products, more engineering is not better, right? It's not like, oh, look how smart this is. It's really sort of, hey, get back to the table because there's just so many components and so many things to do. You're talking a pretty dramatic increase in costs. The other one that Alan mentioned that I throw around, so I know, so it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, is that just a number of um, points you have to make into a concrete deck, right? When you're installing that. Can you speak a little more to that, to a layman, what they can do for the cost of the install?
Certainly, yeah. So when we are estimating a project, the first thing we're looking at on an acoustic ceiling structure, whether that's a cloud or a baffle, is how many points we're going to go into the deck on. How many times do we have to, put a pin into the deck or suspend a cable, suspend all thread and unistrut? How many times do we have to do that? Because every single point is an additional cost. So when you're working with products that can simplify that and can carry fewer points but cover more surface area or more square footage with a certain product, that's going to be a direct savings on the cost of installation.
So what can usually reduce the number of points? I imagine it's the weight, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So the weight is going to be a big factor. How many points you're going to have. So typically, a linear baffle, you're always going to have 2 points on either end. But certain baffles, depending on their weight, you might have to have three or four, or they may have to be spaced every foot. So you're going to have additional cost there.
Mm-hmm.
Another factor to consider is if their acoustical product is part of a structure or a unit or a kit, and whether that's connected with a channel. That could then suspend, let's say, a baffle system that has 8 baffles. You might only have 3 or 4 points of installation if that's put together in a kit. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have to suspend individual baffles separately, you're going to have 2 points of installation
Mm-hmm.
for every baffle.
Yeah.
So you have compare four installation points to possibly 12, 16, 20 points of installation. It's a
Right.
major difference in installation costs.
Yeah. Alan just beautifully set it up for me to mention Baffle Kit. We actually mentioned Baffle Kit before when we were speaking, which, for me was like, oh, but doesn't it look pretty because there's only 4 wires for 7 baffles, right? And we'll make sure to show you what that looks like. And Alan made a really good point. It's like, forget the wires or forget just the look, but suddenly installer will be counting up four uh, points to worry about versus 14 if you're talking about seven baffles is substantially different in what that looks like. The other one that crossed my mind, when we talk about the secondary place in a building where acoustics are installed would be walls, right? And the physics is such that you need to have air pocket, right? A cavity between the acoustical material and the wall itself. Um, again, big differences in installations there as well. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like what it takes to, fur out the wall versus maybe using a product that comes with a built-in air cavity.
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime you have an air cavity, you're going to increase that NRC of that product, right? Because that sound is going to get trapped in there. So if you have a product that it's very simple to create that air cavity, or that air cavity is already embedded within the product, that's going to be a direct installation cost savings right there. So, one product that comes to mind is brick. We've installed plenty of that here in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and that's very simple to increase an air cavity, because we just install, using our pin nails, a strip of PET to create the air cavity, and then that just furs out the entire brick wall system, creating and increasing the NRC of that product. So it's so simple for us to do that, and it saves a lot of time during installation. It saves layout time. A lot of times you have to really lay out the points on some of these products to create an air cavity. Whereas with a product like brick, we're just laying out lines, horizontal lines. So we're saving so much time. We don't have to really measure for anything, because we're creating almost like a grid system on the wall of PET to create that air cavity. So
Hmm.
there's a direct cost savings there.
Yeah, no, I imagine that. And when I see something that's done like that, it also makes me feel, and it's probably not fair. It's like, oh, I almost could do that, right? Versus when I see something where there's a bunch of wood and hammers and perfect, 45-degree angles and things like that, right? Like even visually for a layman, you can see this really takes some serious skill and serious time, a lot of math, and it has to be just so. So it's definitely pretty interesting. And we do teach classes, and biophilia in our classes in general comes up a lot. And with that, we have seen increased interest in strata wood, which actually is something that's here in my office, which I absolutely love, which is PET, the highly sun absorptive material, but on top there's wood slats, right? So it actually comes in like 2x8 sheets, and we see interest in just natural materials have increased, especially after COVID. As we are going back, people are maybe moving less, or trying to really be cautious about the decisions they make, financial decision, but they want to update the space, right? So I definitely see the strata would be really, really popular for us, and even baffles with wood grain prints, or just wood grain prints in general, is something that we keep seeing a lot. Do you guys notice the same sort of a trend right now with the
Yeah, most
natural stuff?
definitely. That is it's a huge trend right now, is the natural look, natural appearance. There's one thing that we know: sustainability is here to stay. Um, Architects, designers, end users, building developers, they're all targeting towards sustainability and having sustainable products, and they're also targeting towards more of a natural appearance in their products. So, having some of these products available that you could have a custom wood print, or like strata wood, it's a wood on top of PET, but it comes in that 4x8 sheet. That's a huge savings right there. First of all, from an installation standpoint, um, so we're seeing a lot of that trend now post COVID, with a lot of those natural appearances, and that was something that was developing, pre-COVID as well. But some additional changes that we've seen, post COVID, is everyone's sticking with mostly the same trend, which is natural looks, sustainability, open spaces. But now, post COVID, there's more separation, more division.
Hmm.
They want to have more private spaces because everyone's more health conscious. So there's certain avenues that could be utilized there to achieve that. Um, One thing that we're seeing as well is open ceilings. They're maintaining open ceilings, but creating partitions, and whether that's an acoustical partition, or that's a demountable partition, or that's a standard partition that just goes up to 9 or 10 feet.
Mhm.
A lot of designers and architects are leaving the ceilings completely open, so that's something that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? It's sort of like, hey, let's create some division, but let's not close the space, right? So probably a little more flexible options there. And uh, any other trends? Because I feel like that's the first line is like, oh, what is out there being considered? Is so. Tell us all the secrets. What are all the
Yeah.
early adopters trying to get installed?
So, workspaces, right? Pre-COVID, workspaces were getting wide open. You're
Hmm.
having, 20 individuals working within a larger space, an open office. Now they're coming in day two. A lot of these offices, whether they just want to remodel, everyone's budget conscious. So people are not necessarily moving around now. They're just remodeling and maybe downsizing a little bit, but creating that separation. How do you do that? A hanging panel is an excellent way to do that. That creates some of that separation. It creates more of a divided space. You're essentially creating pockets, little workspaces within a larger space. It's a great product for cost savings, rather than coming in and creating all these individual offices, and then you have doors, hardware, framing, all these different products that go into creating separate offices. You can create separate spaces with some acoustic products, and that's going to help achieve that. So we're seeing a lot of that today, on designs moving forward. We're also seeing a lot of utilizing some T-grid systems. how,
Oh,
how can
okay.
we utilize T-grid systems and create them to look a little bit nicer, a little bit more appealing than they have in years past. I think folks are kind of getting a little bit tired of your standard grid and tile system.
Hmm.
So how do we create a little bit more pop, a little bit more flair? It also, it's a two-edged sword there, because you're also getting some cost savings. If you can install an acoustic product onto an existing T-grid system, all you have to do is remove the tile and you might be able to install a fresh acoustic product right to the existing grid. So we're seeing a lot of that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely have seen this is partly why we've kind of been paying attention to the T grid because for a little while, for years it seemed like you had two options. One is expose the ceiling completely, which is quite expensive. You have to paint it, make it look beautiful, blah, blah. And then you still need to add the acoustical absorption in form of a baffle or a cloud. And then the other one, which is, expensive, right? And then the other options seem like it's just drop ceiling, the end, right? Like there wasn't something in between, right? Where you want something more inspired than, 80s office, but maybe completely open ceiling is not in the cards, budget wise, or just not even the look you care about, right? So I do, we've been working on this diligently now for years, I have to tell you. I have to say that this came early on with some of the really early conversation with some of the designers that said, if you can figure out a very amazing system that is not at the price point of 40, 50, 60 hours square foot that was around really at that time, then you're gonna have a winner. Alan, strata wood has been utilized onto a T-grid so much. Talking about a way to get um, wood ceiling for a fraction of the cost, right? And strata wood, for those guys that are not that familiar with it, it has a backing of PET felt, so you get the acoustical performance, substantially better at performance than if you actually truly just use wood ceiling. Because Alan touched on the weight difference, right? So if you're doing wood ceiling and the weight and the amount of points you have to attach to a ceiling is definitely increase the cost. And using T-grid, um, a super common, right? Everybody knows how to use it. Everybody has perfected the installation. One of the cheapest options for that. And then just what happens on the bottom of it is really just kind of a decision that happens there. We've done quite a few with our wipe sway, um, and the latest shape that we actually feel like we're a little late. Usually we're in the forefront, but Alan said the same thing. He's like, coffer ceilings are coming back. I'm like, I know. I just noticed that, and we were kind of about to release one of those, so I can't wait to see what it looks like. When were coffer ceilings popular last? Was it 80s, 90s?
I can't remember, to be honest. Every coffered ceiling that I'd seen was installed quite some time ago, and a lot of times you saw them though they were built out of plaster,
Yes.
or a GFRG system. They were very expensive to achieve a coffered ceiling. But now, with the adaptation of PET and PET molded products, you can achieve a coffered ceiling on a T-grid system, in a variety of different colors and even prints possibly. So that's giving the architects, I think, something to think about. So we've seen a lot of that over the last really 12 months, is coffered ceilings, coffered ceilings, coffered
It's
ceilings.
interesting.
It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
I
It
love it's
really
like
came out of nowhere.
I know. I like when sort of like it's almost like fashion coming back, right? Suddenly we're gonna be wearing bell bottom pants there here in a moment.
Right.
It's like one of those. Yeah, and I was just thinking about the coat for ceilings. I think you and I were probably both kids, and it probably wasn't just some random fancy ballroom we saw. We probably saw those ceilings way back
Right,
when. Yeah.
exactly.
And now anyone can have them. You can have them in the office. Yeah, and made out of sustainable product, made out of a product that absorbs sound. My first thought when I saw Kofor ceiling is sort of was actually I didn't even think about, oh, it's just a fashion coming back. What I thought of is like, oh, how genius way to increase the height of the ceiling, right? Because instead of going down, it goes up. So your eyes, uh, you know, absorb the fact that the inside is higher, right? So Tigrid is covered and that inside is higher. But I guess it's just in general always been a look. I don't know if that the height of the ceiling increase kind of a thing was ever the idea behind it, but that's really what caught my eyes first. And again, you don't have to make uh, the ceiling gorgeous, right? Because the T grid will fully cover whatever all the stuff that happens, all the functional stuff that happens up there in a ceiling. Yeah, so that's all super interesting stuff. The I feel like throughout the whole thing, when we talk about installation and trends, the cost of ownership or the cost of getting the thing has been sprinkled throughout. Would you say, Alan, that's sort of like the biggest trend is like, come on, Fox, let's save some money?
Yes, especially 2023. I think the writing was on the wall in 2022. Now here it is 2023. Budget is the key word here. We're seeing a lot of budget considerations, a lot of VE items.
Mm,
We're bidding the wish list, so to speak, on a project, and then coming back before it's awarded and having to offer a variety of different value engineering options for the owner, for the general contractor, for the architect, and that is directly from budget. Because everyone's tightening the belt a little bit. I think everyone kind of feels like there's something looming. There's possibly a recession coming. We can see the trends in real estate and commercial and residential. So it's not trending in the right direction. I know Dallas is a very strong market. It's going to stay strong. It may slow a little bit, but most major markets around the country are like that as well. So everyone is focused on their budget. So
hmm
how do we achieve some of these savings? What kind of solutions are we bringing to the table when a general contractor asks us, what can you provide instead of this system?
hmm
They
hmm
want to achieve this NRC, or they want to have this kind of design. What can we do in lieu of that design? So
hmm
that's where we're seeing a lot of these products getting inserted. And it's a tall order because they're trying to maintain a lot of things. They may be trying to achieve a lead status. How
hmm
do we maintain sustainability in those products? So PET is great. It's great because it really hits a lot of the bullet points that we need. It's so versatile.
hmm
A lot of the products that Frasch carries are excellent solutions to achieve a lot of these challenges that are
That they
presented
want.
to us.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting anytime you have obstacle, like people are like, oh, let's play it safe. It's not necessarily bad. It kind of forces more innovation, right? Like I feel like oftentimes from when constraints are put in place, some of the best stuff comes up, right? Because if sky's the limit and you just do whatever, oftentimes it actually the final result is not that great, right? So things like, hey, can you look at this product one more time? And does it really can it be done even simpler, even more streamlined and things like that? I Frasch started its life actually in furniture, and so we worked a lot with our Swedish partners then, and it was so interesting how much was spent on, okay, this is too much happening, reduce, 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 right? Like that was a goal. Doing simple is hard. That's how when it's sort of like, oh, this is so obvious. That's when you got there, right?
Right.
When you finally get to a point where it's like that. We could talk forever, I feel like, but I think this is a good place to stop. We touched on a bunch of things. If you guys love this, I actually would love to potentially do an additional series on this where we kind of dig deeper into the details and dig into individual hardware, things like that. So we can all get a little more comfortable about how this stuff goes on, how does this work, and how we can create some amazing spaces for hopefully not that much money. If we hire Alan and his crew, maybe maybe that dream will come true. Thank you guys again for joining us for this great conversation. Thank you, Alan, for spending the time with us, and thank you from MAREK Brothers for all the awesome work that they've done with us in the past and in the future.